Witches leave behind more than just cauldrons, and some of their relics carry bits of their spirits as well. So for starters today, what appears to the innocent eye as nothing but a fence stake, perhaps left over from a construction project of sorts, holds a history of sadness and evil doing. Possibly being the oldest item that I'll talk about today, the history of this stake dates back to its use in the 1700s. While the name of the witch it belonged to has been lost to time, the spike was originally used in a black mass ritual in an attempt to summon Satan himself to this world. Now the witch we're speaking of had attempted to curse the stake over the course of her pregnancy, hoping that it would become strong enough to take the soul of her womb in exchange for the devil. So during the ritual, she plunged the stake into the flesh as a sacrifice. But while it strengthened her relationship with Satan, it did not succeed in bringing him to Earth. So the stake was passed down as a family heirloom, bringing a feeling of longing and sadness to any that held it. Until it was finally acquired by the Warrens. Yep, Ed and Lorraine came into possession of this spike, and its story was told in The Demonologist, a book penned by Gerald Daniel Brittle about the Warrens' career, and some of the more rare items in their museum. It's quite a fascinating reference book, especially since it came out way before the Warrens were synonymous with Hollywood demonic. So the last I heard about this spike was that it was being held in the Warren Museum, but when you know that the Warren Museum is technically closed, I wonder if any vandals break in, like what damage they could do with something that looks so unassuming but is so dangerous. Also, with my knowledge of how the Warren son-in-law, Tony Spera, is playing around with the artifacts, I'm a little bit worried that this unassuming spike could wind up back in the hands of some fool and cause a lot more harm in the world. A witch's talisman contains a number square and non-standard English words. It is believed that it may incorporate names of angels, demons, elementals, or worse. This one in particular was reported to have been used by a witch, and it's uncertain what the main purpose of this talisman would have been. Look, a talisman can be defined as an object believed to have magic powers, or hey, maybe it can bring good luck. They come in all shapes and sizes. This one in particular was found in a cottage. Contrary to popular belief, most talismans are not worn, even though there is evidence that some folks did wear them around their necks. They're often carried about in pockets, purses, however you carry things. And usually they are kept near the person or object that they are supposed to protect. So if we're going to travel over to Wiltshire, they have their fair share of witchcraft stories. There have been multiple folks across the county that have been accused and found guilty of being a witch. Interestingly enough, Oaksea Village Pub was rumored to have witch crosses as decoration to just ward off demons. Gotta protect yourself, folks. John Dee was one of the best known magicians of the 16th century, and it is said he used a specific crystal to tell the future and cure disease. According to his own account, the angel Uriel gave him the crystal, along with a recipe for the philosopher's stone. So using crystals in this way was kind of illegal, but Dee got away with it. The specific crystal was later gifted to another alchemist, who stopped trying to use it in 1651 when he believed a demonic god burst out from it, at least according to the Science Museum of London. A witch trapped in a bottle is kind of a form of counter magic. So if a witch was threatening you, the defense? Well, you were gonna create a witch bottle. You were going to attract her and capture her in her evil energy. So these bottles were often filled with rape substances or seawater to, well, off the witch. You'd also use pins and other things to impale them, and herbs to repel them. One analysis of a witch's bottle revealed that it contained urine, iron nails, brass pins, clumps of hair, fingernail clippings, and maybe even belly button lint. So the woman who donated a particular bottle to a museum was like, they do say there be a witch in it, and if you let it out, there be a lot of trouble. I don't want to do that. I don't need trouble. Bellarmine jugs were named after the Italian Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, who wrote anti-Protestant literature to counter the Protestant Reformation. So in 1930, he was canonized as a saint. Now, there is no clear connection between the saint and the jugs, but there's a couple of theories. For starters, some folks thought that naming the jugs after Bellarmine was conceived by Dutch and English Protestants in order to ridicule him. And another one, well, Bellarmine was famously anti-booze. So a bottle and its contents are believed to be used as a counterspell against witchcraft. And there's a lot of other examples of this. Witches' bottles, yeah, we talked about this earlier. So these bottles were found focused around entrances such as fireplaces, doors, beneath the floor, in the walls. Why would you do this? Well, you don't want a witch coming into your house. You don't just protect against vampires, folks. So why did we put iron pins or nails into these bottles? Well, it was believed that iron had magical properties when it came to witches or vampires or all sorts of things. Cursed books. Can't talk about witches without them. The Malleus Maleficarum, translated as The Hammer of Witches, was a book originally written in 1486 by Heinrich Kramer under the name Heinrich Instatoris and Johann Spranger, and this book was considered a key manual for witch hunting. So as for its contents, it claims that women were more prone to witchcraft than men. Because why? Well, according to the authors, women are inferior compared to men. Sure, and according to the author, this would give women the motive to use magic in order to increase their power. The Malleus Maleficarum particularly mentions the presence of witches as midwives, having a chapter referring to them killing their charges or sacrificing them to the devil. Over a 250-year period, it is estimated that between 600,000 to 9 million people were killed worldwide by the Inquisitor's court, and nearly all of those accused were women. Granted, there were some men. We've talked about male witches before. In Europe, 20% of those tried for witchcraft were men. Anyone who didn't really fit the idea of the perfect Christian could easily be branded as a witch, and quite often the accusation was enough to be tried and convicted with little to no evidence. So going back to the book, one copy was published by the Folio Society in 1968 and was donated to the museum by a Mrs. Wheatley of Bratton on the same year. She had inherited the copyrights of the late Mr. Pennethorne Hughes, who wrote the introduction and was the editor of said book. Now, we don't know a lot about Hughes. He is believed to have resided at Southview Cottage in Keyville, Trowbridge, and was a member of the Wiltshire Archaeological and Natural History Society, and he published a book titled Witchcraft in 1952. Pretty apt. Ah, The Conjuring Mirror. No, this has nothing to do with the Hollywood franchise. Originally belonging to a 45-year-old New Jersey man named Oliver Birnbaum, it was used to practice a medieval ritual known as speculum, or mirror magic. He performed a lengthy incantation ritual known as a conjuring formula, inviting the spirit world to assist him in manipulating the future. So when he was first starting to play with magic, Oliver didn't see a lot in the mirror, but the more he concentrated his attention into the mirror, the more control he gained, and the more he could see. So after performing this ritual obsessively for many months, he got to the point where all he had to do was be like, hey, I want to see this, and it would appear. He could tune into the future whenever he wanted. He also had the ability to project people he didn't like into the mirror and single them out for punishment or revenge. So for example, you'd see a victim in a future situation. Oliver would will misfortune to that person, and he'd see it happen just the way he planned it. And while this sounds like a fun way to imagine something, this would actually happen in real life, thanks to inhuman spirits. Now eventually Oliver got to the part where he was so full of himself, he forgot to give homage to Satan, and as a result, the evil he proposed for others began to occur to him, and the spirits he turned loose on his enemies now infested his home. Look, I don't recommend summoning spirits, but if you're gonna do it properly. So after about a week of hell, this man was so terrified that he called some officials in the church and they were like, hey, please send a demonologist. Who did he get? Ed Lorraine Warren. They got there and they're like, oh, doors are opening and closing by themselves, everything's crashing and breaking and smashing. Go figure. So Ed was able to reverse the ritual and bless the house, stopped everything, and when the Warrens were about to take off and go home, Oliver was like, hey, please take the mirror with you. And the 5-foot-tall antique lived in their museum. Oh boy. And that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa. See ya.